Welcome to this session on setting up the tax category and tax rate data template to import data into the system. In this session, we'll guide you through how to use the Excel workbook designed to configure your tax-related data. The workbook includes several sheets, each with a specific purpose to help define how tax rates and categories are applied within the system. We'll start with the instruction sheet. This sheet acts as your step-by-step guide. It explains what details you need to enter, how to enter them correctly, and how the sheets are connected. It also highlights which fields are mandatory and what formatting is required to ensure a successful upload. The instruction sheet provides clarity on how to correctly define tax categories and their associated tax rates, which are essential for applying accurate tax calculations across transactions. To learn more about how to use this guide, you can also watch the Data Template Overview session. It gives you a better idea of how to read and understand the instruction sheet. Let's walk through the tax sheet, which is a key part of setting up your tax rules in the system. This sheet is used to define all tax rates that apply to your organization, whether it's sales tax, purchase tax, exempt rates, or special surcharges. Each row here represents a single tax rule. You'll provide the necessary details that help the system apply the correct tax at the right time. Let's begin with the first column, name of the organization. Here, you need to enter the exact name of the organization the tax rule applies to. For example, Sonic Venture. If the tax applies to all organizations, simply enter an asterisk. Next is the tax rate. This is a unique name or label for the tax rate like tax 12%, tax 18%, or tax-exempt. This helps the system and users quickly identify different tax types. The third column is the description. This field is optional, but it's often quite useful. Here, you can add a brief explanation of the tax something that helps users understand its purpose at a glance. After that comes the tax indicator. This is a short version of the tax name that will appear on documents like invoices. For example, 12%, 18%, or 0%. Then we have the rate. Enter the actual numeric value of the tax, just the number without the percent symbol. So, if it's 12%, enter 12. Next is valid from. This tells the system when the tax becomes active. Enter the date in the format DD-MM-YYYY, such as 01-07-2025. Next is the SO/PO type field. This drop-down determines where the tax applies in the system. Select sales tax for sales-related transactions. Select purchase tax for purchase-related transactions. Choose both if the tax applies to both sales and purchase transactions. Using the drop-down ensures consistent and accurate selection, reducing errors during data entry. Now let's move to the checkbox fields, which control how the tax behaves in specific situations. Sales tax. Mark this as Y if the tax is applied during sales transactions. For example, when you sell goods or services. If the tax does not apply to sales, mark it as N. Tax-exempt. Set this to Y if this rule is meant for tax-exempt customers or items, such as NGOs or government supplies that don't require tax. If the tax rule is not an exemption and applies normally, mark it as N. Surcharge. Mark this as Y if the tax rule includes an extra fee or add-on, like a handling charge or regulatory surcharge. If there is no additional surcharge, simply select N. Next, we have is default. Mark this tax as Y if it should be the system's default tax rule. Only one default is allowed per type, so choose carefully. Then there's requires tax certificate. Use Y here if the tax rate can only be applied when the business partner provides a valid certificate often used for exemptions. And finally, we have include in cost. Select Y if the tax should be included in the product's base cost. If set to N, the tax is treated as a separate amount and not added to product pricing. Now let's take a look at the tax category sheet. This sheet is used to define various tax categories that apply to your organization. It helps apply the correct tax automatically based on the selected category. Let's begin with the first column, name of the organization. Here, you need to enter the exact name of the organization the tax category applies to, for example, Sonic Venture. If the tax category applies to all organizations, simply enter an asterisk. Next is the tax category name. In this column, you'll enter the unique name for each tax category. For example, 18% for services or 12% for spares. This helps easily identify what type of tax is being applied to the transaction. Then we have the description. This column is optional, but it's helpful. You can provide a short explanation for the tax category, such as standard tax on services or tax applicable on spare parts. Adding a description makes it easier for users to understand the purpose of the category at a glance. Next is the tax rate. This field is a drop-down list, and it pulls values directly from the tax rate sheet. You'll select the appropriate tax rate from the available list, like tax 18% or tax 12%. Using the drop-down ensures consistency with previously defined tax rates and helps avoid manual entry errors. Finally, we have the Is Default column. Here, you indicate whether this tax category should be used as the system default. Enter Y for yes, if this is the default tax category, or N for no. Remember, only one tax category can be marked as default, so choose carefully. The next sheet is related to Accounting Default Tax Rate. The Accounting Default sheet is used to define parameter combinations between the accounting book, chart of accounts, and account localization. The ledger code, linked here, will determine which account is used for posting the respective tax rate. This sheet is used to connect tax rates with the correct ledger accounts, ensuring each tax rate is posted accurately in the system. Let's start with the first column, Name of the Organization. In this column, enter the exact name of the organization for which the accounting default for the tax rate applies. For example, Sonic Venture. If the accounting default should apply to all organizations, simply enter an asterisk. This tells the system that this is common across every organization. Now let's move to the second column, Tax Rate. This field is a drop-down list. The values here come directly from the tax rate sheet, specifically from the field called Tax Rate. When filling this out, select the appropriate tax rate from the list, such as tax 12%, tax 18%, or tax-exempt. Using the drop-down ensures consistency with what has already been defined in the tax rate sheet. Next, we come to the accounting defaults, which are represented by the following two columns. Tax credit AR, tax due. These are the ledger accounts associated with tax rate in your system. These columns are important because they define which ledger accounts the system will use when posting transactions for each tax, based on the corresponding account default. First, we have tax credit AR. This is where you enter the ledger code that should be used when tax is paid on purchases or expenses, also known as input tax. Next is tax due. In this column, you'll enter the ledger code that should be used for output tax on sales. Remember, all ledger codes entered in these columns must already exist in your system's chart of accounts. And that's it for the accounting default tax rate sheet. Once this setup is done correctly, your financial postings will be accurate, automated, and aligned with your organization's reporting structure. The last sheet is the list reference sheet. It contains all the predefined drop-down options and lookup codes used throughout the workbook. This sheet includes key categories such as SO/PO type, neatly organized for quick and easy selection. Using these standard lists ensures your data stays consistent and accurate, minimizing errors. It also makes your work faster because you can simply pick values from drop-down menus instead of typing everything manually. Whenever you're working on other sheets and need to select an option, just refer back to this list reference sheet for guidance. By following the structure and rules outlined for the tax rate and tax category sheets, you'll be able to complete and upload your tax configuration data accurately and efficiently. Thank you for watching, And we hope this session helps you fill in the tax data correctly to match your organization's tax requirements.